I also want to look at the art of Egypt today because I think that the art of Egypt has something to really tell us today about what art has the potential to be. That it's not necessarily for our own use or our own personal uh, gain. It's really meant for something else. It's meant, Egyptian art is all about basically art for the gods. It was never meant to be seen by people. It was meant for a higher power, right? And so, and this kind of art has very different meaning, and it has very different um, philosophy behind it. It has a very different sense of what art can be. Because right now art is still in an object that is bought and sold in the American system. However, other cultures have, of course, used art in very different ways. So I want to hark back a little bit today to history to really get a grounding for what the potential of art and the object of art can be. Okay, so we're going to watch Karen's video first, then I'll do a quick presentation on Egyptian art. And then if you have questions about your PowerPoint, getting it ready, then we'll go further into the research. Okay, so that's how today's going to go.
Okay.
Is everybody feeling okay? Are you guys healthy, happy? Okay. Georgina and Amy, we were just talking about sleep. Are you getting enough sleep? How many hours a night do you get?
So I'm in SAT prep. My daughter will be taking SAT Saturday. So I'm also in SAT mode. I'm driving to tutoring. I'm coming back. I'm up late, and yeah. So forgive me. It's been like a couple of weeks, but Saturday is the day.
Done. Isn't it interesting how we live, especially now, we live our children's education, right?
Yes.
Because we're the teachers. That's what it is.
Exactly. I'm all wrapped up into this SAT. So
It's she'll get through it. No worries.
yes.
She'll get through it and she'll do it well. Georgina, how are you and the baby? How many hours are you getting with the baby?
At least 4 hours.
Yeah, okay, people. It's 8 hours for a human body to function, right? Like how
Right.
you need to get more sleep in there. Do you have some help with the baby? Do you have someone to take her while you can go ahead and get a nap?
He always come to the room anyway when he's trying to get a nap. He's walking right now.
Oh, he's
So
walking.
he just all over the place. But my mom is here to help me
Oh,
out.
good.
Oh,
Okay.
good.
So she can take the baby every once in a while.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay,
Yes.
that's so important to have that help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, get sleep whenever you can, please, because you need to function as a human being. And really, the 8 hours is the minimum, right? And most of you are talking about between 4 and 5 hours. That has physical effects, especially if you do it for a very long time. So, all right, again, so I'm going to share my screen. We're going to watch Karen's video on her her artist that she chose. And then we're going to have, is anyone else ready to present, by the way? This is the day when I get to learn from you, so, and Monday too.
I am not.
Okay.
I'm not.
And Monday is perfectly fine. The deadline is 8 p.m. on Monday, but if you're going to get it again in the morning so that we can have the presentations ready to go so that I can share them, that would be great.
Sounds good.
Okay, so sharing screen now, and we're going to, Karen's video is right here. So if you can put your screens on mute, that would be great.
It's Karen. So the artist that I chose was Sarah Seth. Some basic info about her.
Let me see if I can make it louder.
She was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1969. She's still an
Sorry about that.
artist, and her artwork revolves around architecture. Architecture that is fractal-like, and it's really intricate. They are made from from small details from life, and it has marks, and the processes that was used to make this artwork is also a very surprising significance. When you look at it, when you look at her artwork, it may not look complete at times, or you might also wonder how she decided to use these materials, make these marks, or what was the process. And it all has a lot of significance. It all mentions small details from everyday life. She takes waste from home and office supplies to create the miniatures in her artwork. I think that this is a very sustainable way in creating art from things that you have around the house while making something that's really meaningful to her. She incorporates the electric light, fans, water system, and house plants in her artwork in, I think, two or one piece. You will see this. I will point out the features that she uses the electric lights a lot, like from projectors, from lamps, and fans, and water systems and house plants, yeah. And then it has an ecologic theme of interconnectivity and sustainability. Sustainability is from the way she uses the things that she has around her to make art. She isn't going out of her way to get kind of toxic paint or something to put on a canvas. She is trying to use things that are around her, trash even, and make it into art by making it and molding, not molding, but putting all the pieces together to make an architecture. And it has an ecologic theme, as you'll see in, I think one of the galleries will actually be connected to the outdoors, will be connected to nature. Her artwork alters the urban fabric as it mirrors the improvisational quality of cities, labor, and everyday life. This goes back to how it discusses about everyday life. It talks about how, I guess, her feelings living in Boston and how that quality was like, how labor was like, and how people looked at everyday life in the urban perspective. Moving on to the first piece that I'll be discussing.
And we're going to look at only one.
2016 that was displayed at Copenhagen Contemporary. This piece is clearly made from things that are around the house. You have a chair, a couple of chairs actually. You have books, projectors, papers, posters, some sort of bowl-like type. There's a clip right here. There's houseplants all over. There is a sailboat if you look right in here. Well, I see a sailboat, but now looking closer, it might not be in it. Might be making towers, actually. Might be like towers are coming up. They're in the middle of all this mess. You see computers and you see cubes and prisms. And you see a tennis ball. And I saw a binder, and then there's tape right here. And there seems to be some science-y blue mystery vibe going on when I see this.
So when you all look at this image and look at the representation that this is contemporary art. So the artist here is using all kinds of materials that are put together but installed in this way. So they're actually in the space. She's not painting these objects onto canvas. She is taking the literal material, ripped paper, tape paper, strands, and putting them together in sort of a haphazard balance, but it's almost like a heap of trash in one way. right? Can you see? It's kind of like stuck together, but quite and very, very precisely. So it's not just that she threw trash onto the table. She has made these architectural balances. So these things are hovering in space that you could walk around. Obviously, lighting is very important to this piece because the light is coming from within the piece. The light is coming from either lamps or screens, and it's in a dark room. So that contrast, when we looked at light in every artwork, there's a light, medium, and dark that play a role, but she's orchestrating the light and where it's coming from. And any question about the title that gives us a little bit of a meaning behind the work is called Timekeeper. So when you think about that in terms of time and keeping time and what that means, how do these fragments and materials and just what you see relate to the title Timekeeper? Does anyone have, just think about any of the clues that she's giving us from what objects are on the table, these kind of celestial maps that she's projecting onto some of the paperwork that's in here. What do you see? Do you see a heap of trash? Do you see light playing against form? Amy, go for it.
It's items, articles, or just things that kind of in her stage, or what I would say, like a phase. If she's going through this artistry moment, she's keeping time of every little article or piece of work that she's using to present her piece.
Yes. Any questioning about, anyone reject that this is art? Any of you on the, like, would you, if you went to the museum and you saw this piece, what if there was a number attached to it? What if it was worth $20,000-$30,000, right? Would you question, would you think that it was art? Is it art? If you went into the space, would you consider, or is it questioning your notions of art, of what maybe art can be? Art is a tricky term, right? We imagine art to be a sculpture or a painting. That's our sense of what art is. This challenges that notion, right? Because these are objects that are coming from our houses. These are computers, these are papers, right? And that's, it's tricky to come up to a piece and say, what's this? Why is it in a museum? What's behind it? So it's in contemporary artwork, when you see the art from ARC21 that you'll be researching, it's okay if it brings up notions of how is this art? Why is this art? And why is she's a fantastic artist. She's thinking about science in relation to climate change, in relation to our notions of time, in how things are breaking down. Like, things are literally ripped and broken and sort of teetering on this some of these things might be in the form of collapse or ready to collapse. Like, if you went close to it and maybe blew on paper, it would perhaps destroy the thing. You know, it's very tentative. It's hung in such a way that it's very, very it's specifically done this way. What I'm saying. And it is contemporary art. It is valued, and she's a valuable artist to our times. And so it's a question of rethinking and restructuring our own brain to say, okay, so if this is art, and I'm questioning that, how do I reframe my thinking to consider what are the art elements, the light elements, the color elements? She has specific colors in specific places. Imagine if this was a painting, right? She has a red square in a particular place, a green square. That yellow tennis ball is an important character in the whole picture. It's illuminating on the bottom right-hand side. So anyway, she knows the formal elements of painting, but she's applying them to everyday objects. So we're not going to listen to all of Karen's video, but she's certainly a very interesting artist to bring about. And if you're interested in this type of work, you can, of course, look up her work as well. I'm going to switch gears now to Egypt and Egyptian art, and we're going to think about collectively how it is that Egyptians thought about art from their perspective, not from ours looking at it. We're not just looking at it because it's beautiful work. So we're talking about the New Kingdom. There were Egyptian art had over 3,000 years. Over 3,000 years, artists from Egypt practiced pretty much the same thing. So just imagine that. Imagine that we are actually closer to the reign of.
Can't hear you clearly.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Can you increase the
Is
volume?
it better when I don't have the ear?
Okay,
Is this better?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. Sometimes Zoom doesn't like headphones. So for the 3,000 years in Egyptian reign, that's a substantial amount of time that the drawing style did not change. So actually people from 3000 BCE could actually read the hieroglyphs and read, and because the art was so standardized, they can still make meaning from the hieroglyphs from their predecessors 3,000 years back. Imagine that's like us being related to, to the reign of Cleopatra, which was about 3,000 years ago backwards. We're closer to her than the beginning of Egypt was for the epoch that it was going on. So we're going to look at the New Kingdom. There were 3 periods of calm in Egyptian art history, and there was chaos in between. So this is after the chaos, after the Hyksos invaded from Syria, which is at the from the top. But there was a new ruler, new pharaoh that came to unite Egyptian culture. Her name was Hatshepsut. I'm sorry, and it was interesting because there was no word for queen in Egyptian times. There was only the king. Women did have high status, and the mother of the pharaoh and the wife of the pharaoh had enormous power. And there were some women who also pressed to be in power. But Hatshepsut ruled actually for 20 years, and she really distinguished herself to be the king, to be the pharaoh, to really embody the pharaoh. And in turn, also embodying the pharaoh meant also that she was one of the gods. She really was chosen, and she projected this myth that there was a female that was going to be born and she was going to be a ruler. And she really made this a whole propaganda about her reign. She also made this temple, which was unlike the temples that we see in Egypt. Tell me how this is different from your idea of what the temples of Egypt were built like. Like, look at the surrounding area. Look at this over here, how it just sits in the landscape. So is that different from your from thinking about temples and Egyptian temples and the pyramids and what we see? How is this different?
First and foremost, temple used to be in the city.
Yes, right? Yes. So it was in Thebes, and so it was it was part of the city, and it actually protruded upwards towards the heavens, right? Hatshepsut put her temple into the ground, quite literally. There was it's surrounded by these enormous cliffs, right? You have the natural setting over here, and then you have a very geometric setting at the bottom. It's still an upward feeling, like you're going into the temple, but of course it's at the very, very ground level. And some of the rock is actually carved from the rock that's behind it. Most of this temple has used the natural resources and the natural materials to build it. It wasn't hauled from elsewhere. It was also a procession for the gods. They moved Osiris's sculpture from one side of the Nile over to the other once a year in a procession. And on the way to the procession, Hatshepsut also understood that if she made sculptures of herself, and she did hundreds and hundreds of them, then she would remain in history. She also made it out of granite, which was incredibly heavy, right? She understood the idea of permanence and what that was. But the artwork was to, first of all, project herself as the pharaoh, as the king. She wore the headdress. She wore the beard. This was the shoulders are broad, the breasts are reduced, so that it is in the tradition of Egyptian pharaohs, right? But she's giving her this on the way, and these sculptures, she made about 8 of them, or she had them commissioned, and she put them on the side of her temple where Osiris's sculpture would have walked through. So this is actually this kind of gesture of kneeling which is hard to do. It's hard on your knees. But she's now kneeling for eternity in front of the gods, not only in front of Osiris's sculpture that's passing through, but she herself is representing herself as the next god, because once a pharaoh dies and is embodied, they are thought to become the god, right? Merge with the god. But even though she dressed herself, or she was the pharaoh, she was the king. On the back, she wrote that she was female, just to be very clear that she was actually the first and only. Under her kingship for the 20 years, Egypt had enormous power. She really projected this calm, but also gained a lot of land. She sent out a lot of ambassadors to go and collect, and people really sort were drawn to her, and Egypt ruled really great, and that epic was really powerful. The next people to reign in Egypt were under the pharaohs, where the scribes were really important. So the people who wrote the hieroglyphs, and drawing and writing were very, very similar, right? They were pictures. And so that visual art had really developed into these incredible, so think about, this is an excavation of a tomb of one of the scribes. His name was Nebamun. And it was from 1400 to 1350. This is like the Michelangelo of the Egyptian times, the way that this is painted. And this is just one of the scenes. There were more than 4 walls. It was dug into it, a stone tomb that they were building for themselves, but it was decorated in these amazing frescoes. Frescoes are, the plaster goes onto the wall directly, and you have the paint getting embedded very quickly into the plaster. So you have to be very precise and know exactly what you're painting. But look at the style and look at the technique, especially of the animals, right? Look, you have the shape of the animals, the cat, the duck. The cat is now hunting the duck, right? You have the shapes of it, but you also have the textures of each of those, the feathers and the fur on the duck over here, the pattern of the feathers over here. You have the fur of the cat over here. This kind of harks back to when you're thinking about the 40,000 years before of the cave paintings. This is another, look at the butterfly over here, right? Look at the insect at the very, very top here. There's a butterfly. The way that it was painted is incredible to know. And again, they don't have the animals in front of them to paint them. So they must know these forms in such a detailed way. But they're not, imagine this, they're not painting it to show off to people, right? This is a tomb. No one is going to see this, or no one is meant to see this art, this beauty. It's only for the gods. So think about that, and especially today, if you tell artists, you are going to be decorating something, and it was meant to never be seen by humans. So you're not doing it for your own ego, if that makes sense, right? Because a lot of people will show off their skills. They want to. It's nice to communicate, and of course, Nebamun also must have known the best scribes or the best artists, because he commissioned these walls. This is a hunt. So this is him. This is his story in the afterlife. This was a hunt that he was doing with his wife over here and his daughter over here. And these stories, they believed, of course, that in the afterlife is eternal, and you get, and you really live in this life to get to the afterlife, to really enjoy the afterlife. There are many scenes of him enjoying a dinner on the opposite walls. Of course, when you see this broken shard, this is where the colonists came in, right? And excavators and archaeological digs, and really roughly kind of broke this piece and took it out of its context and took it to the museum, right? We have to be really careful now where these artifacts reside. This was not meant, I mean, it is a amazing archaeological find, and it's an amazing relic that we can see and learn from. And at the same time, we have to question, this was not the purpose of this piece. This was not to be taken out. And especially when look at the poor quality of how they they really took a sledgehammer and like broke and ripped out this tomb. So think about what that does to the purpose of this painting. The purpose of this painting was to house the body of Nebamun in the afterlife and give him this kind of eternal afterlife. We have destroyed that, right? The people that came and robbed these tombs, they were doing it for scientific, for the museum, but there is a question now as to what the museums are actually doing. What is it that they're really, I mean, it's thievery, right? Like this should be back in the tomb. If you want to go see it, you should go on the site. Of course, it would make it much more difficult, but there's a question now. How do we see this incredible art, appreciate it, but not destroy it in the process? That it's wrong. After the reign of Hatshepsut, there was a new reign by Akhenaten. And he took a very different stylistic approach. This was not like the Egyptian gods or Egyptian pharaohs before. It wasn't standard. Usually Egyptians were broad-shouldered. Again, they had the same stance. They had people drawn in the same way. Mathematically, they would really precisely draw them in the same position, that they were very much like on the tomb wall where where the pharaoh was or the scribe was seen. People from thousands of years back could have seen that picture and they would know how to read it. Akhenaten changed that, and he also changed the idea that Egypt had many gods. He changed that to have one god, the sun god over here, and it's represented by that circle at the top. There was a sphinx, or there was a snake right here in the center. And then he put out rays of light going to Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti. But look at how this family dynamic, this is very different. Look at him holding his oldest daughter over here and caressing and holding up her head over here. But also the style of the bodies. When archaeologists looked at this slate, they questioned whether Akhenaten had a deformity, perhaps, but it wasn't. They found it was more the style of the art that Akhenaten really wanted to distinguish himself from that rigid stance. So you see him sitting down with a pudgy belly, which was a sign of royalty, and you see him really kind of having this family dynamic, and you can see how the next descendants from the gods. Over here you have the Ankh symbol, which is a sign of eternal life, are directly pointing at him and his wife Nefertiti. So there was a co-ruling that happened between especially Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and she's holding another daughter here, and the third daughter over here is playing with her earrings. Of course, we were talking in the other class how they didn't know how to sculpt, babies at the time very, very well. They just thought of them as little people, which they kind of are, but they didn't really look at and study their sort of body shapes. And again, it was stylized body. It was not necessarily a naturalistic body. Any questions about this? Because it's a very, very interesting and very different Egyptian piece. Usually when you think about Egyptian art, you see and you imagine the hieroglyphs and the stance of for example, like from Nebamun's tomb, right? You imagine this is what Egyptian art, I think, heralds, but brings up. This is very different. This is like a family scene, right? I mean, it's almost like they shared the family, right? The family work. I mean, he was engaging with his daughter. Oh, and he's also like giving her a kiss. This is him giving her. How sweet is that? Yeah, and of course, then there's the mummies. So again, but this is the Tutankhamun, the mummy, the last sarcophagus, and of course the Westerners, when they opened up this tomb, they went, that was the biggest treasure of the century. At the same time, of course, it was no treasure. The gold sarcophagus was meant to house the body of Tutankhamun, who died early when he was 18. But it was meant to take him to, basically it represented the gods. The gods were supposedly gold. They had blue hair, and you could see in the lapis lazuli. So it's describing him as for eternally, that he was going to stay and remain in godlike form. Of course, when that was taken out, what does that do to the power and to the idea of how they thought about the afterlife? It kind of destroys it in a way. So this is his head mask. Again, it was on his mummy, it was on his body. What happens when we take it off and display it in a museum? So jump in and let me know, because these are my, this is how I feel about the artifacts of Egypt. Yes, it's important that we study them, and we can talk about this one, the papyrus last, but I want to move us so that we can see. There it is. Okay, so talk to me about what you think. Yes, it's an amazing artifact, but it wasn't meant to be gawked at. It was meant to turn and transform the Pharaoh Tutankhamun into a godly state. And by us taking it off of the mummy and displaying it, yes, it's it's full of rare stones, and the way that, of course, it's a beautiful artifact. But there's something to me that feels unethical about how we are treating Egyptian art, right? Because the art was not about the object. It wasn't about the gold was for the gods. It wasn't for man. It wasn't for man to trade. And that's very, very different, right? It's also very different to think about the idea in our culture, or at least in the American culture. Death is something that we fear. Death is something that we live in fear of. When Egyptians were born, it seemed like they looked forward to the afterlife, because they had the idea that things continue, that they don't end just because of the end point, that when your body dies, right? They, in fact, had this, all of their art is for that. It's for that process. Most of the riches of Egypt were put inside the tomb so imagine, right? Imagine grandma's gold ring that we think, oh, well, when she dies, she'll pass it on to me because she doesn't need it anymore. She's going to be dead, so she doesn't need these artifacts. In fact, in Egypt, it was the other way around, where people would bring the most valuable material and give it to the pharaoh. There's actually a treasury in his tomb where all the wonderful materials were there for him to use in the afterlife. So all the artifacts and all the artisans would spend their days building and making these beautiful, beautiful objects, knowing that they would end up in a tomb. That's also a completely different idea of what you work for, right? There's a different principle of how we work and what we work for. So any thoughts about this idea of Egypt art and Egyptian art? And yeah.
If I understood you correctly, you're saying if they make this art after they dead, they take it along with them?
So they would have so once they would start the process of making these objects even when the pharaoh was born. So Tutankhamun was born, and they would start his temple, right, where his body would be buried when he died. And then all these artifacts that they made were for the process of him. So the death mask was on his mummy in the sarcophagus. The mummifying process was also very interesting, right? They would take out all the internal organs. They would lather the body with first they would sit in salt so that it would dehydrate. There was a whole process and engagement with death and dying that I think our culture is so unconnected with, right? Now it's in this current times of COVID, we're thinking about it a little bit more because there's death that's occurring at a faster rate right now. But there's still not, I don't know, in my life, I've been to a number of funerals, and it feels like we don't have a very good process of acknowledging the dead and understanding that it's not, in Egypt, it wasn't a finite state. It wasn't the end. It marked a new beginning, if that makes sense. So I just question, what art, from looking at the Egyptian art, what art is, what it means, who's it for, and does it serve perhaps a higher purpose. They really thought that these objects were transformational. They were supposed to take you from one state of being into the next state, right?
Professor,
Yeah, go for it.
can I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay. It seems like all these arts, especially the first one you said, it was dedicated not to human being, it was dedicated to either idol or the oracle. This one seems like that too. I don't want to go biblically because in the Bible it's established that they have a lot of idols in Egypt. Maybe part of the way they honor their gods. Maybe this is one of it.
Yes, I think most of the artwork was in fact to honor the gods, and to show the best of humanity, or show the best of potential, and for the God, right? For the God's pleasure, not for a human pleasure. And I think because we've taken these things out of context, we've taken the mask off, we've taken the sculpture away from the temple where it was supposed to be housed, we've taken them all out of their context, and it devalues them, or it deappreciates them. They were meant for something else, and by us taking it into a museum for people to, when people look at the death mask of Tutankhamun, they are first, the gold of it is extraordinary because it's cast gold. All the precious stone that is inlaid, and the fine craftsmanship that goes into it, obviously we appreciate very much because it's never been done before. This is such a extraordinary piece of art, but when we label it as art, we almost diminish it in its value. It meant so much more. It again was a transformation from a death state to a godly state. And what happens to this idea of eternal life, right? In both Nebamum's case, as well as, for example, in this one, when it was taken out of the temple, what happens to that idea of eternal life that he was supposed to have surrounded by these paintings? And we've ripped it out. It feels like a robbery to me. I can't think of another way of thinking about it. And I think the museums are starting to think that way as well. I think the museums are questioning what objects they have, and how do they get them, right? These are housed in all over the world, in the Metropolitan, in England, in Germany. And they're not in Egypt. It seems like robbery. And it seems like we need to correct that. So when you're thinking about the art object, and when you're thinking about what's it for, I think really consider what philosophy people have. It shows something else. It shows a deeper meaning. And some artists, the good artists, the artists that are really making a difference, know that the art is not necessarily just for sale, right? Which is what most artists want to. They want to be able to sell their work so that they can have a living. But the great artists that are really remembered 600 years later, 1,000 years later, they do it not for their own purposes, if it makes sense. All right, so that's why I wanted to look at Egypt. Now, feel free to go to Art21 and find someone that really speaks to you on a level that's not necessarily just, oh, I like it because it's beautiful work, right? What does it question? What does it say? Yeah. All right, and I'll be here on the phone call as long as you need me for research help. If you need if you have any questions, as long as you answer why the artwork is relevant to you, that's the most important thing to answer. But you have those questions inside my RCC to answer as you're thinking about that presentation. And you can write the answers straight on the slide, okay? So you'll have 1 to 2 images of the artwork that feels important to you. And then next to it, you want to take down notes of why it's relevant, who is, all that stuff. All right. Any questions? Okay. So I'll be here. By the way, if you feel like you want to do the research on your own, you're welcome to leave the phone call. You don't have to hang out with us if you don't want to. But I'm going to be here. I'm going to put some background music on so that we are I have some.
Okay, you said in the FCC that we can get something. Is it the slide you told us about the Egypt that you showed us?
I don't have the slides there, but I will. I can share them in there if you're interested.
No,
I'll
which
pick up.
slide are you talking about that we can comment on it or whatever?
That was identify slide. So the presentation that the project that you're working on now is identify slide, and it's the assignment that you're researching on 21st century artists on Art21. And
Okay.
in the coursework on my RCC, you will see that there's a set. It'll describe here. Let me show you where that is, because it's a bit. Sometimes
Okay.
my RCC is a bit hidden. It has so if you go to coursework and you go to identify slide, which is what we're working on during this class right now, and please, yeah, and that should be done. If you go inside the assignment, you should be able to see these questions, which is what I want you to focus on. They're right here. I'm going to keep them on the screen. Here they are. This is how I'm going to mark your grade. First, research and artwork on Art21. Note the name of the artist, the times, and the culture that they're coming from. Write its relevance to you. That's really important. Why is it that this art, why is it out of all the artwork that you saw on that website, why is that one speaking to you, right? It's usually when human beings create something that you really resonate with, that you really feel strongly about. You might not know intellectually why you think this is a good work, but you feel it somewhere maybe in your gut that it's really saying something that you feel strongly about. And then how much detail can you see in the artwork? What does it represent? What does maybe the artist feel about the artwork? Why did they create it? And again, why is it relevant to culture? Okay. Any more questions? Sorry, let me bring this a little bit down so that you can see and read that clearly, because it's now at the bottom of the page. Here we go. Okay. So you should, whenever you look at the coursework, you should be able to open up the instruction file, and you'll have a little bit more description as to what I'm looking for in the assignment. So always look in there, because I know it's a bit hidden in the coursework, these instructions. I wish it was kind of front and bold, but okay.
Professor.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
with the title, that's where I'm having a little problem. Should I put the person picture and then the name?
Perfect. So
okay.
as long as, yeah, I think the artist's name is important.
From the first page. I mean,
yeah, on the first slide. Yeah, that would be great. And then if you have the title for the art piece, sometimes like in Karen's piece, the title makes sense to include, because it's such an abstract work. You need to think about maybe why the title is what the artist identifies as the subject of the piece. So if there is a title for the artwork, I think that's important, especially if it's an abstract work. It's important to note what the title is, because you can see a red abstract painting, and if it's titled The Relationship That I Had with My Father, it would make that kind of meaning, right? Whereas otherwise it's a red blob on a painting. So yeah, so sometimes the title is very, very important. Sometimes it's not so much. So see if your art piece's title is important, and you can put that on the first slide as well. The next slide should be the artwork. So find the picture of the artwork, and this you won't get from Art21 when you're doing your research. This will be in Google. If you put the name of the artist into Google, you should be able to find and go to images on Google. You should be able to find the image of the artwork.
Yeah.
So for example, this was Susan C. That was her art. And if I go, so I looked up her name, I click on images, and then I will see all of her work, right? The ones, so she is very interesting. Look at the architecture pieces. This is photographs on wires. So it's not just abstract kind of mess. I mean, she uses a lot of common materials, but it's orchestrated and put in such a way that it's kind of a beautiful sculpture at the same time.
Right.
So that's how you'll get the images. And to save one of these images, you just right click on it, and there should be a button that says Save Image As. So I do that, and that will put the image on the desktop for me. You can label it Susan C1, and you save. And that way you have that stored so that when you open up your Word document or PowerPoint presentation, you'll have this image to embed into your document.
Right.
I'll do that right now, actually. I'll show you how to do that. So when you have, if I have my Word open.
No, I can insert. That one I can. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So if for those people, in
I
case
don't
you,
know.
if you don't know, if you pull up your Word document, you go to Insert, and then there's Pictures available, and you go to this device. You want to, because you've saved it onto this device. And I had it in the desktop. You just have to remember where you saved it. And I saved it under her name. So Susan C. Maybe went into my downloads. There it is. As soon as it jumps up, you put it into the file name into here, and it'll pop it into the Word document. So what are the artists that are inspiring you? Who are they?
I'm gonna write about Sarah Walker.
Kara Walker.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, she's
I
incredible.
think we have seen a little bit of his acting class during one of our lectures.
Right.
And I mean, I really like the story behind, because it take us back, like the colonial days when kids and Black people are being used for like free labor. And I like the way she uses the papers to create a story, like a whole like story, and
Yes.
on the wall.
She's an incredible woman. She's an incredible professor.
Right.
She also started this work relatively young. So she was in her 20s from Columbia when she started these series, and really, I would look up, if you were doing Kara Walker, she has a really, these are her drawings that we looked at in class, but there is a piece of sculpture that she did, which was called Subtlety. And it's, so she created a huge sculpture
Yep.
of the Sphinx in the Domino sugar factory. And actually the whole sculpture is made out of sugar.
Yep.
Which is incredible. And the way that she did it is really interesting in connecting to Egyptians, actually. And of course the history of sugar and what that means and who picked sugar. She had these amazing sculptures of children in front of the Sphinx that were, and it was hot in New York, and these sculptures were melting on the spot when you walked in. So you saw these beautiful sculptures of little children carrying the sugar cane, and at the same time they were melting in front of you. So it's an impermanent material. So if you're doing Kara Walker, I would also look at this piece in particular, because it's a huge, powerful. I mean, this was what it looked like on the interior. And actually, the building was taken apart after this installation. It was no longer, the Domino factory collapsed, and it was it was no longer functioning in Brooklyn. So that's why she got to. Yeah, it was a beautiful piece, beautiful and powerful.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, well, Shagun, who are you thinking about? Amy, you?
I'm working on Nigerian-born Europe artist,
Excellent.
Yinka Shonibare.
How do you spell it?
You said?
How do you spell Barrett?
You gave us the list.
Yeah. It's on the, it's art, and I'll look at the R21. I just don't know. I don't know all the artists that are on R21.
You pull out some artists for us, and
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. Oh, excellent. Right. I know who it is. Okay.
So there is a particular one where this artistic work he did that he put the Admiral ship inside a bottle.
Yes.
You remember?
Yeah.
So I was still trying to read about him.
Yeah.
I haven't gone far, but that thing interests me. It looked like something we did in Africa, where people, they put some herbs as if they cut a tree and put inside a small bottle. You wonder how wonder they do it,
Yeah.
So something like that is very, very strange.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I picked that interest in him.
It's great work. So you have Yinka, right? Yinka Shonibare, is that who it is?
Yes.
So he has incredible work out. I'll go look at the images in Google. So on top of, and he has these incredible fabric pieces.
Exactly, that fabric is very, very good.
And the fabric in connection to, he puts them in costume of sort of Victorian era ballroom gowns. It's really incredible, right? Look at this piece over here, where you have these two figures, beautiful fabric, incredible fabric, but in these coats, in these sort of colonial coats, they're just pointing guns at the heads that are missing. It was such a powerful sculptor and a really great artist. Awesome. Yeah, same thing over here. I've seen one of his pieces. And this piece was really interesting. The one that it was in Boston a few years back in the Institute of Contemporary Art. And it was a huge library where all the books were covered with African fabric. And it's just visually so incredible. And then to think about changing the history or rewriting the history from an African point of view. Really.
Yes.
Look at this one. This was based on a Rococo painting where a woman was swinging on this, like, there was a painting exactly of this, but to take the fabric, the African fabric, make it, the shoe was flying in the air. Just really, really good work. Okay, awesome. You guys are hitting the biggies. Amy, who are you thinking about? Have you found anyone yet?
I'm still looking at a lot of Hank Williams pieces. What I was thinking about, because it's pretty much what the past and present, and what I was thinking about doing is compare and contrast of times back till today.
Yes.
So I may have a photo of Hanks today and what was.
Oh, right. You think Willis Thomas, right? From the.
Yes.
Yeah. His is great. Have you seen, he has this really interesting one of football players, but confronting his, so when we look at his work, there's a photograph that I'm thinking about. This is also a great piece, taking the protest signs of I Am a Man, but there is one where I think it's his photography works. And you'll find the ones that speak to you, but when I saw this one, and all of his sport ones are really interesting. So you have the NFL football player right back, and the symmetry of this, of the person picking cotton, right, and the body language of that. It's just such a link to history, and now bring it into complete present, right? Like this kind of melding of history and present. And the way that football players are used, or especially by in the college level where players are not paid, right? And it's huge business for colleges to play professional athletes, but not pay them at all. They pocket the money. So it's very much like the cotton system, where people who were actually doing the work, who were actually doing the labor, are not getting the benefits of that system at all.
It's like, and a lot of them are like body sculptures. So it's like the body of a Black man is being presented as this prophet of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's enough now. The trauma that the Black body has suffered for 400 years is something that the culture hasn't addressed, and not even but there's a step of healing, that when you suffer trauma, you have to go through the healing process. Well, we've traumatized the Black body and continue to do so for so long. Where's the healing? Where's where's at least the apology of that brutal history, right? Yeah, it's enough already. And he definitely points out, right? I mean, this is so direct. Yeah. Anyway.
yeah.
He knows what he's doing. You know, he's
Right.
he's quite
Making a statement.
making a statement. Absolutely making a statement. Look at this, right?
Right. All in shame.
Anyway, yeah, okay. I am not worried about any of you guys. You guys are picking fantastic people. I will let you. I think we are coming up anyway to the end of our class. So if there's no question, Ayomide, I want to hear from you too. Who are you choosing? If you're on there, if you haven't stepped away.
I'm still working on it.
Okay. Have you looked at Art 21?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Is there a particular artist that you're interested in?
Right now, I don't have any.
Okay. Let's look to see who we can recommend. Do you know the work of Latoya Ruby Frazier?
Nope.
So I'll put her name into the chat. She might be interesting, or she might at least start the conversation. Let me put her name into the chat, and you'll find her in Art 21. So she's has some interesting images, but I think you also might like, actually. Do you remember the video that we saw the other day of Felix in Exile? I don't know if you were on that call, but it was by William Kentridge. And because of your interest in drawing, you might look him up. He really, he presents a very interesting story from the point of view of South Africa, from apartheid regime, the kind of separatehood. But at the same time, he's blending those stories and blending those histories and really changing what happens on the paper. Understanding that the drawing is just particles on paper. You shift it a little bit, you erase here, and a new image comes up. And so all of his videos, you can look at his videos online, are drawn basically stop motion, very low tech, where you photograph and you go back and erase the drawing, and but then you build on meaning. So he might be interesting to you. What other artists do you know that you've been inspired by in the past?
I got a couple, but right now I'm just sticking to Art 21 to get someone to work on. I should get it done by the end of the day.
Okay. Fred Wilson might also be someone. Oh yeah.
Because I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Access to Google for our RCC emails now, that's not accessible. Like, we cannot use Google.
You should.
We have to use Outlook.
You should be able to use Google and Outlook at the same time.
Oh, okay. So my password has been changed. Maybe I need to link up with IT, but I haven't been able to use my Google email.
Now,
The
that's
password
strange.
was changed. Yeah, it was
You haven't
strange.
been able to use your Outlook email from RCC?
I can use the Outlook, but I can't use the Google.
Oh,
So there may be, as far as using Google Slides, I won't have.
if you Amy, if you can't use Google Slides, feel free to just do Word, Microsoft Word, and see if you can maybe pull the images right from Hank's page. Just see if you can right-click on them and save them. If you can't pull the images from them, we can also just use his website during your talk. You can just tell me which images you want to focus on, and you can read, and for the submission, just put in a Word document with your notes on it if it's difficult to import the images, and we'll just look at his website directly. So.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think I can use PowerPoint, but I like Google Slides because it gives you more animated work.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's strange that you can't. Is it maybe signed in with a different person in the account?
I don't know. Once I've got the syllabus, and then, I mean, like the first day I had access to Google, but once I started logging in to the links, it like shut my access up. My what it reads, it says my password has been changed.
Oh, has anyone changed your password?
No.
Okay.
And it won't even allow me to like recreate it says go back to your domain or reach out to your domain. I don't know if that's IT.
I would actually contact, because I don't know, unfortunately, I have no idea about IT and Google. I would reach out to the IT people at RCC.
Okay.
Be able to help you. Let me give you the email for the IT department.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. IT.
I know I called and you get an answering machine, so I don't know, like even for tutoring, it doesn't have like an IT person you can schedule a session with.
There's so you can email, it's just it@rcc.mass.edu. That's their email. But I want to get you a real person. So let me see if I can so here is, if I can move us again. Here's the email, it@rcc.mass.edu. But I believe the person that you want to talk to is Marcus. He's part of the hold on, let's see which Marcus it is. There's two. Let me see if he's the one from IT. Maurice Barrett. That's the one. He does most of the IT stuff at RCC, so he's direct right here. So here's his email is mbarrant, BARRANT @rcc.mass.edu, and here's a phone number. He should be able to answer as well. 857-701-1208.
Awesome.
That's for anyone who has any trouble, actually, since this is recording. Anyone who has access. Okay.
I
contact.
appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, I will let you do your presentations. I look forward to learning about all these amazing artists come Monday. And then we will continue our process together of changing the world. Sounds good to me.
Yes.
Okay.
Have a good weekend. Please get some rest.
Thank you. Yeah,
12 hours
we
on the
do.
weekend.
Thank you very much.
I need
Bye-bye.
it.
Bye. Bye, guys. Get some sleep.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.